What's really going on inside Red Bull? Why is Verstappen winning while Tsunoda sinks to the back of the grid? What happened at the Spanish GP doesn't just show a rift between drivers, it reveals a much deeper conflict within the team. Comment below, do you think Red Bull is sabotaging Tsunoda to favor Verstappen? Are we seeing the beginning of the end for Red Bull's dominance in F1? In this video, I explain how the 2025 Spanish GP exposed the technical and human tensions within Red Bull Racing between an unstoppable Verstappen and a Tsunoda who can't find his way. Red Bull arrived at the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix under pressure it hadn't felt for years. After dominating previous seasons, the Austrian team now faces a real threat: McLaren. The British team has not only matched Red Bull's performance, but has begun to surpass it in several key technical aspects, especially on circuits where downforce is crucial. This season's RB21 has proven competitive but inconsistent. On tracks like Melbourne, with its fast and demanding corners, the car didn't perform as expected. Verstappen was only able to salvage a third-place finish after drastic adjustments to the car's setup, which already signaled that something wasn't quite right inside the Red Bull garage. The advantage they used to have is no longer guaranteed. In this context, the Spanish GP was presented as a kind of trial by fire to measure not only the car's competitiveness after the latest updates, but also the individual performance of the drivers. And that's where the gap became evident. Max Verstappen qualified third. Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, finished last on the grid. That gap wasn't just technical, it was symbolic. The pressure wasn't just external. Internally, Red Bull is also experiencing tension. New technical directives, especially TD018, which regulates the flexing of the front wings, have forced the team to rethink certain aerodynamic advantages that had benefited them in the past. This regulation came into effect in Spain, forcing Red Bull to make significant changes to its car. They redesigned the front wing profile, modified the rear suspension, and fine-tuned the cooling system to optimize engine performance. All of this, in theory, was supposed to balance the team's performance against McLaren. But the results were mixed. While Verstappen managed to adapt quickly to these modifications, extracting the RB21's full potential even in adverse conditions, Tsunoda failed to find any rhythm at any point during the weekend. And that raised an inevitable question: is Red Bull really developing two cars with the same level of priority? These kinds of stark differences between teammates are rarely explained solely by talent or driving style. In this case, reality points to something much deeper, a difference in approach within the team that could be marking the beginning of a new era, one in which Red Bull ceases to be the dominant force on the grid and becomes a team divided between priorities and results. The paddock has been filled with whispers pointing to a bigger problem: the possibility of a driver lineup change. Yuki Tsunoda, who was promoted after a standout season with Racing Bulls, now faces the real risk of losing his seat before the end of the calendar. What seemed like an opportunity to establish himself in an elite team is quickly becoming a countdown. Some sources close to the team claim that Red Bull has already begun exploring alternatives. The name that has been most strongly mentioned is Isack Hadjar, reserve driver and one of the most promising talents in the academy. What's most revealing is that Hadjar is not only doing simulator work, but has already been called up to run private simulations at the Red Bull Ring. In a team as structured as Red Bull, this isn't just preparation, it's a warning. A clear message that Tsunoda's time could be coming to an end. And there's more. From within the team, it has emerged that the car's development is not being shared equally. While Verstappen receives each update as soon as it's ready, Tsunoda has had to settle for previous specification parts in 3 of the last 5 races. These kinds of decisions don't happen by chance. When a team begins to centralize resources around a single driver, it's usually because they no longer see the second driver as a viable part of the long-term project. Even within the technical department, decisions are revolving exclusively around Verstappen's feedback. This leaves Tsunoda out of the car's evolution process, which inevitably further marginalizes him in terms of performance and confidence. And this isn't speculation. He himself acknowledged this in his statements after the Spanish GP, admitting that every change we try worsens another aspect. This frustration, expressed publicly, isn't just a sign of pressure, it's a sign of disconnection from his own work environment. Furthermore, at a team like Red Bull, where meritocracy and results rule, these types of situations are rarely resolved with patience. Historically, they've shown they're not afraid to make drastic decisions if they feel performance is below expectations. Just look at how many drivers have been in the second seat over the last 5 years. The message has always been clear: if you don't deliver results, you're out. And it's not just a sporting decision. Red Bull is losing ground in the Constructors' Championship. McLaren is growing, and every point counts. Having a driver lacking pace represents a disadvantage the team can't afford if it wants to stay in the fight. Therefore, Tsunoda's future doesn't depend solely on his individual results. It depends on how his mistakes affect the entire team in a context where every error can cost them key positions in the standings. Amid all the internal tension and the focus on Tsunoda's future, Max Verstappen maintains a solid and dominant stance. His role at Red Bull is no longer that of a simple number one driver. He is the central axis around which the entire project revolves. Every technical decision, every aerodynamic change, every race strategy is designed to maximize his performance. And so far, the gamble has paid off. His third place in qualifying in Spain, on a weekend marked by regulatory instability and technical challenges, is further proof of his ability to adapt to any circumstance. Verstappen has reached a level of maturity that sets him apart from the rest of the grid. His approach is neither impulsive nor emotional. It is methodical. At the Spanish Grand Prix, he was better than anyone to interpret the new limits of the RB21 following the updates implemented by the team. He adjusted the rear wing at the last minute before Q3, a decision that increased downforce by 7% and allowed him to secure a privileged position on the second row. These kinds of decisions don't come from instinct, but from a precise reading of the car, the track, and his rivals. In the race, his control was equally surgical. While many suffered from tire wear in 33-degree track temperatures, Verstappen extended his runs on hard tires to 25 laps without losing performance. This silent but effective management was key to consolidating his position without taking unnecessary risks. He's not just a fast driver, he's a strategist who understands when to attack and when to hold on. That's what keeps him consistently in the fight for wins, even when the car isn't the best of the weekend. From the team management, the trust in him is total. Christian Horner has made it clear that Verstappen is the reference point around which everything is built. His comments in technical meetings determine development priorities. His driving style defines how the suspension is tuned, how the new aerodynamic parts behave, and even how the engine maps are configured. This level of centrality has consequences. While Verstappen evolves with the car, Tsunoda struggles with a less refined version that is increasingly distant from his driving style. The reality is that Red Bull is making decisions that reflect an unequivocal commitment. It's not just about retaining Verstappen, but about building a technical environment that is uniquely suited to his needs. And in modern Formula One, that comes at a cost. When you invest all your resources in one driver, you are inevitably neglecting the other. This is a strategic choice that can benefit the Drivers' Championship, but it puts the Constructors' Championship at risk if the second car doesn't meet the minimum requirements. Despite everything, Verstappen has been cautious in his public statements. He has avoided entering into direct controversy over his teammates' poor performance. In his remarks after qualifying, he preferred to highlight the advantages of the circuit for his driving style and downplay any confrontation. But his body language during briefings, his constant presence in technical decisions, and his leadership in the garage speak volumes. He's the one in charge. Instead of balancing forces, Red Bull has opted to concentrate power. And this is evident not only in the results but also in the team's internal dynamics. The engineers work for Verstappen. Decisions are made based on his convenience. And in this context, any driver who isn't at the same technical and strategic level, as is currently the case with Tsunoda, inevitably falls behind. The possibility of Red Bull making a change to its driver lineup isn't just a matter of internal speculation. It's a move that could profoundly alter the current balance of the Formula One grid. If Tsunoda ends up leaving the team, the impact wouldn't be limited to the void his seat would leave. The true effect will be felt in the team's overall dynamic, in the strategic pressure on Verstappen, and in Red Bull's role within the Constructors' Championship. First, it's important to understand that changing a driver mid-season is no small feat even when performance isn't as expected. Replacing a driver creates a domino effect. New adaptation times, new technical setups, new communication challenges within the garage. If Red Bull decides to invest in Isaac Hadjar, for example, they would be bringing in a young talent, yes, but also someone with no experience on F1 race weekends. This represents an immediate risk in terms of results, especially when every point counts. Furthermore, a driver change would send a clear message to the rest of the grid. Red Bull no longer has any room for error. That a team like this, with 4 consecutive championships under its belt, feels the need to replace one of its drivers so early in the season speaks to an internal pressure they can no longer hide. It also reflects that, no matter how dominant the past has been, the present is full of uncertainties that must be resolved quickly. From Verstappen's perspective, a change of teammate could also be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, keeping a weak driver in the second car guarantees him absolute control of the team, without interference or internal competition. But on the other, if that car continues to underperform, Red Bull will lose consistency in strategies, race simulations, and the ability to cover different tactical scenarios during the Grand Prix. In a close battle with McLaren and Ferrari, that could be decisive. And there's something else. If Red Bull decides to focus everything on Verstappen, sacrificing the development of the second car, it is opening a dangerous gap for the Constructors' Championship. Unlike the Drivers' Championship, this championship depends on the combined performance of both machines. One car scoring podiums and another missing out on points is a formula that, in the long term, doesn't work. McLaren has already understood this. That's why they are investing in 2 competitive drivers. If Red Bull doesn't rebalance that balance, it could pay the price with the loss of its hegemony. On the other hand, from an institutional perspective, replacing Tsunoda would also call into question the value of Red Bull's driver academy. For years, the team has boasted of developing talent from its lower divisions. But if young drivers don't have real time to adapt, if they are required to produce immediate results without offering them technical stability or confidence, then what good is that system? Every driver discarded too quickly erodes the credibility of the development project. And we mustn't forget the external context. Rival teams are attentive to Red Bull's every move. If the internal structure begins to show cracks, if tension seeps into the paddock, then opponents don't just interpret it as a sign of weakness. They exploit it. Formula One is as psychological as it is technical. A team that begins to show doubts about its own drivers also begins to generate doubts in its surroundings, its partners, its engineers, and even its sponsors. Ultimately, replacing Tsunoda or leaving him out of the project may seem, at first glance, a quick fix to improve results. But the reality is much more complex. The real consequence isn't just losing a driver, it's taking the risk of completely unbalancing the team's internal structure in the midst of the battle to stay at the top. The upcoming races won't just be another leg of the calendar. They will be the true turning point for Red Bull. What happens at tracks like Silverstone, the Hungaroring, and Spa-Francorchamps will set the pace of the season, not only in the fight for the title, but also in the internal balance of the team. The pressure can no longer be hidden, and both Verstappen and Tsunoda will face challenges that go beyond the stopwatch. Max Verstappen arrives at this stage with a clear emotional and technical advantage. His control of the car, his ability to adapt to regulation changes, and his influence on the team place him in a position of strength. But that doesn't mean his path is clear of obstacles. The technical evolution of the RB21, while improved in certain aspects, is still a step behind McLaren on high-speed, variable traction tracks. Verstappen will need to maintain a near-perfect level to continue fighting for wins, especially if the team can't completely close the gap in raw performance. And it's not just the car that will play a crucial role. Strategy will also be decisive. Red Bull has already proven it can design intelligent race plans, such as the choice of compounds and pit stops during the Spanish GP. But with the threat of rain at some upcoming races and the weather variability at certain European circuits, real-time decision-making will be more important than ever. In that area, Verstappen has the advantage, but also a huge burden of responsibility. As for Tsunoda, his future will be at stake in every free practice session, in every qualifying session, in every lap he completes. The margin for error has been reduced to 0. Silverstone, a less technical and smoother circuit, could give him a chance to regain confidence. But if he doesn't, his continued presence in the team will be seriously compromised. The environment no longer offers him protection. Every mediocre result is another stone in the bag. And the feeling is clear. It's no longer about improving, it's about surviving. The team, for its part, has two paths. It can continue to focus all its resources on Verstappen and accept the consequences of having a second car that doesn't respond. Or it can pivot its technical approach, redistribute parts, listen to both drivers, and try to maximize combined performance. But that takes time, and in Formula One, time isn't a luxury the top teams can afford. Furthermore, the external pressure is relentless. McLaren and Ferrari have already shown they are ready to capitalize on any mistake by Red Bull. If the Austrian team fails to maintain consistency across both cars, it will not only lose ground in the Constructors' Championship, but will also see its chances of remaining a technical and sporting leader in the category diminish. Every decision made from now on will have direct implications for the championship results. And let's not forget a silent but powerful factor: public perception. Red Bull has built an image of dominance and efficiency, but if the narrative becomes one of a fractured team, with one driver holding it all together and another on the verge of replacement, that reputation will begin to falter. In a sport where details matter as much as results, perception also plays a role. On sponsors, on technical partners, even on the internal morale of the staff working in the factory and on the track. Red Bull's immediate future, then, won't simply be a matter of fastest laps or pit stop strategies. It will be a test of cohesion, leadership, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Verstappen may continue to shine, but if the environment around him destabilizes, his room for maneuver could also shrink. And in a season as tight as this one, that small margin can define success or failure.